So Victor kindly invited us here to argue that the one thing that connects us all is actually worthless. So I figured we'd just start with introductions to talk about why we left Yale and what we're doing now. So my name is Dan. I'm the co-founder of Thinkful, and I left because there was actually not that much risk in leaving if you think about it. You're always welcome to go back. It's been around for a couple hundred years. We'll probably be there for another few more if we need it. And I figured there was a chance that I could actually find something that I love doing and learn a lot in the meantime.
I actually left Dan for very similar reasons. I saw my path. If I stayed and graduated, probably Wall Street. I stay there for probably a very long time. I'm not really sure how that path would ever
Turn the mic on.
Hey guys, I'm David Luan, and I actually left Yale because I always knew that the real solution for building commercial robotics wasn't going to come from academia. And when I was offered the Thiel fellowship, I kind of saw it as like a one-of-a-kind opportunity to go out and like actually start working on what I've always wanted to do.
My name is Darren. I left Yale because I was spending a lot of time doing biology research actually, and I was more interested in sort of the intersection of biology and translational science, of how do we actually commercialize a lot of the interesting things that are coming out of the labs. And so to touch on a little bit more of what I've been bringing, I've been working with a small team of 3 to improve sort of cancer diagnostics actually through a combination of interesting technologies, image processing, machine learning applied to actually take patient tissue biopsies. To enhance sort of the quality of treatments that oncologists can provide, as well as hopefully later down the road really democratize high quality cancer diagnostics.
So Paul, first question goes to you. I'm wondering if the Yale Network still proved useful, even though you don't have a degree.
Yeah, good question. So the simple answer is absolutely. I think nobody has ever not wanted to talk to me because I did not graduate, and I've been surprised by a couple of things. One is how many Yaleys there are in the world, and I'm not sure if it's just because they're very overrepresented in the sorts of people I tend to meet, but just literally probably every 1 to 2 weeks I run into somebody at a completely unexpected time that turns out to be a Yaley. Just last week I was in a partner meeting with this big debt fund about buying loans on our marketplace, and it turns out one of the partners there was a Yale alum himself, and then the sort of second thing I've been surprised by is how sticky the question of which residential college you went to is across years and generations. So, we're in this big partner meeting and everybody just stops to listen to us have, this kind of stupid conversation like, oh, which residential college were you in? And sort of go back and forth. But yes, simple answer is absolutely.
And David, you actually decided to go back to school. I'm wondering why and what you hope to accomplish.
Yeah, I think I kind of had a really long adventure throughout like my entire academic career. The interesting thing was when I was at Yale, even though I now entirely work in computer vision and robotics, I never studied anything that was at all relevant to that. I was a political science major and a math major. And basically like how it all kind of worked was like when I was younger, I had been working in computer science like for my whole life. So like between ages 8 and 12, I got a certificate in computer science from my local state college and did a lot of research on the side and like worked at iRobot for a while. And so I had all of that kind of experience. So it was not a huge risk to leave. And upon coming back, I knew that I wasn't actually coming back for the coursework. But a large part of why I came back was like because I'd already been working on tech for so long. I kind of saw Yale as like my way to really diversify my life experiences. Like I started out in directed studies when I started school there, and coming back from my last year was in large part because I saw it as like one of the last remaining opportunities that I had to go back and spend a lot of time with a bunch of people who were motivated by different things that may not always have been technology. And I thought that was pretty unique. And the timing also worked out really well for me as well because my co-founder was in his last year of his grad program at Penn, and I figured since I had 8 more months of college, I'll fit it.
Darren, do you think you missed anything by not going back to school?
I think there's some things that I really enjoyed while I was at Yale. I played Carillon, actually. That was one of the things that I really loved about my experience. Some people appreciate it, I guess others don't. No, there are a lot of things that I think are very unique to sort of the Yale experience. People obviously, that sort of, I think it's a combination of not just the density of people, but also kind of the diversity. That's something that you don't really get anywhere else, especially sort of in Silicon Valley. But then, I don't really view this as kind of a college versus no college or sort of a degree versus no degree decision in my mind. It's more of like, what is the best venue for me to kind of accomplish my goals? And so for a while, actually, while I was doing the fellowship, I saw myself becoming more and more research-oriented again. Some of the work I was doing became much more basic science and less translational. And so I kind of thought to myself, maybe I should go back to school. Maybe, doing a grad school program or maybe in a more supportive environment. I actually went and talked to some folks at Stanford that I was interested in collaborating with. I thought potentially about just going straight to a PhD. And then I was like, is this really what I want? And I guess most 20-year-olds, or I guess it's 21 then, facing an existential crisis, I was like, all right, this is a big decision. I'm going to take a quick trip, go out to Europe, did like a 3-week backpacking trip. Came back and realized that I still wanted to kind of play around with the more translational side of science. So this team of cancer diagnostics. So it's hard for me to say kind of in the near term whether I want to go back to Yale or not. But I think it's a really unique place, and as David kind of touched on, there's sort of this really unique opportunity to learn different things that are not really related to the sort of skills that we do right now, and just kind of are more important from a macro innovation standpoint. I think could be useful to kind of go back to that.
So a question we often get asked, usually with a little bit of worry in the person's voice, is there actually any value to the degree at all for what we're doing? Paul, do you want to weigh in?
So I guess my first thought on that question is, it might just be sort of an eccentricity of our time, but there's this strange fascination, I think, especially in Silicon Valley, with people who have dropped out. And I think it's because of a logical fallacy that goes something like this. I've heard of a person called Mark Zuckerberg. I know he dropped out of college. I know he made a lot of money. I hear you dropped out of college. That must mean you're going to make a lot of money, like Mark Zuckerberg. And so, surprisingly, I've actually found that I think people tend to be more positively inclined towards listening to what I'm saying when I tell them that I've dropped out, which is kind of weird because that's not a reason to listen more to me. But I think my college experience was certainly very valuable. I don't think I could be where I am today if I did not spend 2 years at Yale or in college. And for me, I think most of the benefit came in the social development that I made while I was there. I think when I was just out of high school, I didn't have a lot of great social skills. I certainly didn't have the kind of emotional maturity that would be needed to do anything independently. And I think I grew a lot personally while I was at Yale, and if I just didn't go to college, I think I would be screwed.
And David, you're the only one who's lived both in Silicon Valley and in New Haven working on a startup. Can you tell us about how the Yale community is, and is it a viable place to work on a startup?
New Haven is absolutely the best place to be when you have a large set of technical goals that you need to achieve in a very short time without a lot of distraction. And so that was like a huge pro on our end, because at the point, so essentially we're building like a general system that everybody can use to figure out what's in their photo and video content. And like already having proved out many things on the market side of that, most of the biggest doubt was in whether or not we'd be able to actually deliver this product. And as a result, what we really needed to do was for me and my tech team to just focus on getting a lot of those goals. And that was absolutely wonderful. And I think a really important part about New Haven is I think it's a great place to be when you're starting out building your company, especially because like YEI really comes in and pitches out and helps a lot with introducing you to a lot of relevant people in the space, and basically just like hand holding you along the way during your early stages. And I think that's been really advantageous.
And another question we often get is whether we could have done what we did if we'd stayed in school, and maybe it would have been 2 years delayed, or maybe it wouldn't. But Darren, do you think you would be doing what you are if you had stayed?
I don't know, I think one of the interesting things about the fellowship that's really unique is that it really puts you in a place where you have to think critically in an unstructured environment, right? I feel like going to Yale, I was like this guy who was very much on that track with work hard in high school, get to college, work hard in college, get a good job as finance, management consulting, etc. You get stuck on this sort of default track. And I think there's this, I could actually see this myself sophomore year, and that this was part of the motivation for why I applied for the fellowship. I saw myself going down that track without really thinking about why I was going down this track. Why was that the default? Why, what did I really care about? And so for part of me, the real value of having kind of time during the fellowship is just spending this unstructured time thinking about what I really care about. And it's hard to say, like, if I'd stayed at Yale and gone down that structured route, if I would have ended up in the same place, just because it's just been such a different experience to be out here and have so much space and kind of access to resources without any sort of structure at all.
Dan, what about you? We've been talking a lot. You're sort of in the same position.
The one maybe provocative thought that I've sort of encountered is on the question of whether people hold it against you that you don't have a degree at all. In a lot of ways, once people know that you got in, they actually don't really care what you did afterwards. And the cynical way to read that is actually the admissions department is the majority of the value of the system. And that after that, 99% of people graduate, so whether you stuck around and got the piece of paper or not, people don't really confer any value on that experience. That is definitely a cynical way to read it, but in the 2 years that I was in college, I learned a lot, and then in the 2 years that I was not in college, I also learned a lot. So it's not really clear to me if that's unfair at all. And I think Victor's trying to get us back on schedule, so are there any questions from the audience?
Say when I first heard of the Thiel Fellowship, I had this people reaction. This guy, he benefited from being a Stanford professor for track, able to accomplish perhaps I think he would have admitted as well, in large part because he had an opportunity of some disruptive time, even for our education. And I don't think anything you guys have said that was wrong. You're going to look back and sort of say, I would have been great to go back to Yale and spend a couple more years reviewing that. But it really, having been in Silicon Valley and operating for so many years with startup companies, there's a whole world of that. Not a whole lot of it. And I really, I have not been convinced on the common sense that this is really.
Sure, I think that's fair. The only thing I'd say is it's not fair to read that what we're doing is not educational and that the next 25 years we're not going to do anything educational. I think most of us believe we've learned a ton in the last few years, and that looking ahead to the next 20, there will probably be periods of our lives when we'll focus full time on education. But that may not happen at an institution. That world is changing. And the university system is fundamentally going through a massive change right now. And Yale's gonna be fine. They're still gonna get the best kids in the country, and they're still gonna get the same number. But if you look at the vast majority of the universities, they're really struggling right now, and that's only gonna get worse over the next few years. So how people get educated is fundamentally going to be different over the next few decades.
I would just add that I don't think any of us, and I don't want to speak for Peter certainly, but I think none of us here believe that everybody should drop out or nobody should go to college at all. I think, in fact, we would probably say the majority of people should spend 4 years at college, and I think we all benefited from our time there. And just one thing that sort of probably the four of us all feel is that we preferred learning sort of in a very self-driven environment, much more so than many other people, and so we feel particularly sort of suited to the path that we took.
I think it's interesting that I think you said that and think about almost that long out there, a lot of them finish school, but they didn't drop out of high school, whatever. But I think that's the same thing. But it's basically what I'm saying is that can you equate success to somebody like Richard, for instance, right? Who's might have dropped out of high school, or somebody who didn't go somewhere and then someone got into a big school like Harvard or Yale. What's the, I guess, thinking like, is that what's the difference? I feel like it's not something new that feel is fine. You know what I'm saying? So it is,
I think I'll let somebody else take the second half of that question, but I kind of wanted to address some of the stuff you pointed out at the beginning. And I think that like it's really important for us not to do any cargo culting when it comes to entrepreneurship. When we say the word entrepreneurship, it means so many different things, and I think especially in the current environment, we place a lot of emphasis on the notion of entrepreneurship by itself, whereas I'm personally convinced that it doesn't mean anything to be an entrepreneur unless you personally are very highly invested in a particular area that you know that you want to do things in. And I think that like when we talk about entrepreneurship, it should really be much more grounded based on like what people are pursuing as an independent opportunity, and that entrepreneurship itself as like a subject or like a career is an interesting definition that I don't necessarily totally agree with. So I'll let somebody else take like the second half of that question as to whether or not Yale is necessarily different from other places.
Then you mentioned the admissions department as the validators are on space and so forth. Not to be productive, but I wonder how your comment that Yale will continue to attract the best kids in the country squares with Fish Copper's observations about leading pipes and differential starting opportunities and so forth.
If you look at the numbers, he's basically right. Yale has an amazing financial aid policy, and so do its peer schools, and it's doing a great job, but it's 18 years too late. The entire school system before that is failing a massive percentage of the students in our country. And, you know, a lot of our peers are doing great things, working for Teach for America or for other schools and trying to work on that problem, but it's much more systemic than that. I think Yale is frankly too late to solve that problem, and no matter what they do, short of changing the school system, and they're doing some great stuff there, but even that's very small. The problem just runs much deeper, and it's that's too late in the life cycle for them to really have a deep impact.
You guys mentioned enjoying the models, but I'm wondering, similar UConn that posture on what is learning towards entrepreneurship. I remember when I was here doing career services, like on a track that like did feel like
So I guess to repeat the question is whether while we were at Yale, we felt that the culture really kind of supported entrepreneurship, or what kind of the general vibe was. And I'd say I don't know, there's this sort of corollary to what David is talking about, which is what does supporting entrepreneurship really mean, right? Is it teaching you how to make a business model and teaching you how to acquire users, or is it something that's more kind of deeply rooted about kind of fostering a deep interest in some domain that you care about, that you care to actually change? And I think if it's the latter, then Yale is very much good at supporting that goal of kind of creating students that are interesting, that care about things that matter, and thinking about sort of ways of improving that status quo. And so in that sense, I think very much found Yale to be supportive of that.